Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the poem of the day for today, Tuesday, October the 7th, 2025. Thank you for joining me again or for the first time. We recently started a short series here on some poems by Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm hoping also on my podcast that this links to. It's not really a podcast, it's a audio feed. Podcast would be a pretty generous characterization of what I do on there, but it's basically the audio form of this series. But I will add at times other sound files or other episodes, if you will. And I'm hoping perhaps at the weekend to read some of his prose as well to share with you via that avenue. It'll also be on Substack. Today we're going to read a poem by Poe from 1827, just like Dreams from yesterday's poem. This one's called The Spirits of the Dead, and it is in 5 cantos, 5 stanzas, but then they're marked with Roman numerals, so I'm going to refer to them as cantos here because they seem to have more of a deliberate break to them stylistically with the intention of the author kind of marking them that way. And so I think there's supposed to be more of a gap in between them, but they're also supposed to be read more as, kind of sectioned off, right? There's no enjambment, for example, that's going to go between these stanzas. There are 5 cantos of irregular length, and something that we did not see a whole lot in yesterday's poem, though it was present, is we're going to have a lot more M dashes in this, which is often associated with Emily Dickinson, of course. She was kind of the queen of the M dash, but Poe's going to use some in here as well. So this is Spirits of the Dead from 1827 by Edgar Allan Poe. Thy soul shall find itself alone, mid dark thoughts of the grey tombstone, not one of all the crowd to pry into thine hour of secrecy. Be silent in that solitude, which is not loneliness, for then the spirits of the dead who stood in life before thee are again in death around thee, and their will shall overshadow thee. Be still. The night, though clear, shall frown, and the stars shall look not down from their high thrones in the heaven, with light like hope to mortals given, but their red orbs without beam to thy weariness shall seem as a burning and a fever which would cling to thee forever. Now our thoughts thou shalt not banish, now our visions ne'er to vanish. From thy spirit shall they pass no more, like dewdrop from the grass. The breeze, the breath of God, is still, and the mist upon the hill, shadowy, shadowy, yet unbroken, is a symbol and a token. How it hangs upon the trees, a mystery of mysteries. Okay, so 5 stanzas, and there's mostly a end rhyme in couplets to this. Sometimes it's really forced. We get alone, stone, pry, secrecy, solitude, then stood again, will, frown down, heaven given, beam, seem, fever, ever, banish, vanish, pass, grass, still, hill, unbroken token, trees, mysteries. So you'll notice that it's kind of rhyming pairs, rhyming couplets throughout, except for the second canto, where we have alternating rhyme for the first 4 lines and then a rhyming couplet at the end of that. And it's worth, because these cantos are set apart 1 through 5, it's worth us sort of summarizing or paying attention to what's going on in each one. In the first one, the speaker is introspectively reflecting on the feeling of being alone. I think the phrase of the soul shall find itself alone is interesting because It's talking about soul, I think, here as your inner life or the feeling of the essence of who you are, something that is somewhat distinct from your body, and also something that maybe is understood as being tied up with the mind in this case. Although, Poe's writing very supernaturally, so it could just refer to um, like a ghost or a spirit as we typically understand it, your own spirit as it's inside of you. Um, and when you're alone, it says that you begin to think thoughts of death, the gray tombstone. Um, and the thing that would be nice about that for the speaker is that there is not one of all the crowd to pry into your secrecy. Um, and so the thoughts of death that come to you while you're alone also are thoughts of peace. That isolation and that separation for the speaker are something that is peaceful. And this idea is extended into Canto 2, where the speaker tells us to be silent in the solitude, which is not loneliness. And they say that very clearly, directly, distinctly. I think it was Paul Tillich that says that the English language developed two words, very similar, meaning different things. Loneliness for the pain of being on one's own, solitude for the joy of being on one's own. And that's expressed here, though not as parallel and not as celebratory, in the second stanza, where that solitude is distinguished from loneliness. Because you're alone as like the newly arrived person, but then what else is coming around you is the spirits of the dead who in life are before you again and then are around you in death, and their will shall overshadow thee, be still. So the ghosts and the spirits that kind of swarm upon you after you're the newly deceased, or if you're somebody who's living in this kind of liminal space of finding yourself alone and having these thoughts of death, staring into the abyss, feeling the imp of the perverse, as Poe refers to it later, that the like more seasoned souls or the longer dead people can sort of impose a will upon you that overshadows you. They're more powerful. And then we get a look at the night in Canto 3. And I think you can hear in Canto 3 the way in which these thoughts of loneliness, not loneliness, solitude, helplessness, a sort of death drive, lead to the speaker not viewing the world, the natural world, the way that we normally do, but seeing it through a lens that is colored by something kind of sinister. So here are examples of what I'm talking about. The stars shall not look down. We often say the stars are looking down upon us as though it's this way of feeling guarded or feeling accompanied by some greater hand, right? Some celestial being. Stars are not looking down. It says, from their high thrones in heaven with the light of hope to mortals given. So you are not getting, it's the quite opposite, right? Simba would look to the sky and not see his father. But rather, after this M dash halfway through, they're red orbs. This is referring back to the stars. Without beam to thy weariness shall seem as burning and a fever which would cling to thee forever. So the way you're looking at the stars then is not a symbol of hope, but that they're glaring at you. And we when we talk about stars being hopeful, we talk about them twinkling. This is burning. It's referring to them as being red, destructive, hellish. And it's going to burn on you forever. There's again that hell imagery clinging to you as though you have a fever that you cannot shake. So even though the poem begins with a feeling of the solitude of the soul, the desolation of it that's popping up here is something that also is going to affect the physical experience of being in a body. That's where fevers happen. And then these next couple lines, the first time I read them, I was like, something's missing just syntax wise for this to make sense. And then I realized the emphasis has to be on the now. Now are thoughts thou shalt not banish. Now are visions ne'er to vanish. So I think the now is the occurrence of those first three cantos and the kind of being surrounded by the dead, being at this moment of possibly passing over. And it's thoughts you can't get rid of. You've lost this control as the spirits have forced their will over you. And they're visions that will not vanish. It's not something scary that you can kind of blink away or that goes away in the daytime when the imagination ceases to tend towards more horrific or terrifying things. Um, from thy spirit they shall pass no more, like dewdrop from the grass. So the images do not pass your soul, they cling to it like dew on the morning grass, something that returns every single morning and something that sits there without running off. Canto 5 seems to have a turn in it just at the beginning, but I'm not sure if that holds all the way throughout. So we begin with a breeze, the feeling of a breeze, which is likened to the breath of God. That's the metaphor that's used to describe the breeze. And it says, is still. So there's no breeze. What's interesting is the speaker identifies a breeze, but identifies the breeze by there not being one there. And the mist upon the hill, shadowy, shadowy, yet unbroken, kind of like a breeze is, hangs upon the trees like mystery. So the thing that we're seeing here in the evening, or perhaps the morning, but I assume we're in like the twilight of the night, is that there's this break where the mist just kind of stops. And it stops upon the hill, and because the wind's not blowing, it's obscuring the vision of the speaker or of anyone around them, clouding them, cloaking them, ensconcing them in this mystery of mysteries, right? The ultimate spot in which you cannot see anything, you're disoriented, you're lost in your surroundings. And I think the image of kind of standing among a unbroken shadowy mist upon a hill is probably the feeling of, floating out in space or having your eyes closed and again becoming disoriented, not really knowing where you are. There's this feeling of kind of like a dislocation. I often imagine people being like really far under the water in the ocean and having no sense of the amount of space to the top or the amount of space even to the bottom, that you're just kind of suspended. And so I think the poem leaves us there, suspended in this shroud of mystery. That for many people I think would be terrifying because it's the unknown, but for the speaker it seems to be something that they're taking some slight enjoyment in, that they get a little bit of pleasure out of the terror of this, which again is something that Poe writes about in The Imp of the Perverse. So this one I think had some stronger imagery, at least for me, than Dreams yesterday. But also as you read more from a poet, especially in a short period of time like this, like doing a series, I think it becomes easier to draw some connections and to anticipate the way they express themselves, to learn, just to kind of slip into that mood. It's like listening to, again, an entire album or listening to a certain artist for several days at a time, that there's just a different way that you approach it and work with it. We'll have more Poe tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you again for joining us, and I wish peace be with you all.